The day started like any other for Mrs. Evelyn Johnson. At 76 years old, she had grown accustomed to the peaceful routine of her life in the small town of Cloverfield. Each morning, she would take a leisurely stroll through the park, where the sun's rays filtered through the branches of ancient oaks, casting dappled shadows on the pathway. It was her time to reflect, to connect with nature, and to find solace in the simple beauty of the world. Evelyn had lived in Cloverfield her entire life. She had seen the town grow and change, had witnessed the comings and goings of families, and had been a part of the community's fabric for as long as she could remember. She knew the faces that passed her by on the street, the names of children who had grown into adults, and the stories that had shaped the lives of her neighbors. Cloverfield was more than just a place to live. It was home, and its people were her extended family. But on this particular morning, as Evelyn made her way to her favorite bench overlooking the pond, something felt different. The air was heavy with an unspoken tension, and the usual chatter of birds seemed muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. She noticed a group of teenagers gathered near the entrance of the park, their voices low, their gazes shifting uneasily. Evelyn had seen these boys before, young, pale-skinned, with shaved heads and an aura of defiance that made her uneasy. They were not the type to frequent the park, and she couldn't recall ever seeing them this early in the day. As she approached the bench, she felt their eyes on her, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck that made her pause. She had always believed in the goodness of people, in the idea that kindness begets kindness, but the look in their eyes was something she hadn't encountered in a long time. It was a look of disdain, of something far darker than mere indifference. Evelyn sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged the folds of her floral dress. She tried to focus on the water, on the gentle ripples created by a passing breeze, but the presence of the boys lingered in her mind. They were still watching her, and she could feel the weight of their gaze growing heavier with each passing second. Suddenly, the group began to move. They approached her slowly, almost cautiously, as if testing the waters before making a decision. Evelyn's heart rate quickened, and she clutched her purse a little tighter, her thoughts racing. What did they want? Why were they coming closer? Her mind flashed to the stories she had heard on the news, stories of violence, of hatred, of people being targeted simply because of the color of their skin. She had always considered Cloverfield to be a safe haven, a place where such things couldn't happen. But now, as the boys drew nearer, that sense of security was slipping away. The leader of the group, a tall boy with piercing blue eyes and a scar running down the side of his face, stopped just a few feet from her. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his posture, in the way he carried himself, that made Evelyn's stomach churn with unease. The other boys flanked him, their arms crossed, their faces set in hard lines. For a moment, there was silence, a silence so thick that it felt like the air had been sucked out of the park. Evelyn looked up at them, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. She wanted to speak, to ask them what they wanted, but the words caught in her throat. Then, without warning, the leader took a step forward. He was so close now that Evelyn could see the individual freckles on his face, could smell the faint scent of cigarettes clinging to his clothes. He stared down at her, and for a brief second she thought she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, as if he was grappling with something deep inside himself. But before she could decipher it, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. Evelyn's breath hitched as she saw the glint of metal, a knife. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she instinctively recoiled, her mind screaming at her to run, to get away. But her legs felt like lead, and she remained frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The boy held the knife out in front of him, the blade catching the light in a way that made it seem almost surreal. Evelyn's eyes were glued to it, her pulse racing as a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She had never been in a situation like this before, had never felt so utterly helpless. Then something unexpected happened. The boy's hand trembled, and he let out a shaky breath. He looked at Evelyn, really looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the vulnerability beneath the tough exterior. He was just a child who had been hardened by life, by circumstances beyond his control. "Please." Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes pleading with him. "You don't have to do this." For a moment, the boy hesitated. The tension in the air was palpable, and it felt as though time had slowed to a crawl. The other boys exchanged uneasy glances, shifting their weight from foot to foot, clearly unsure of what was going to happen next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the boy lowered the knife. His shoulders slumped, and the hard mask he had been wearing cracked, revealing the uncertainty beneath. He turned to look at his friends, who seemed just as lost as he was. "We shouldn't be doing this," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. His voice was low, but Evelyn heard it, and a spark of hope ignited in her chest. The other boys nodded in agreement, their bravado fading as quickly as it had appeared. They looked at each other, then back at the boy, waiting for his lead. The tension that had been building finally broke, and with it, the boy's resolve seemed to crumble. Without another word, the leader pocketed the knife and turned to leave, his friends following closely behind. Evelyn watched them go, her heart still pounding in her chest, her mind reeling from the encounter. She couldn't believe what had just happened, how close she had come to something terrible, and how, in the end, the situation had diffused itself. As the boys disappeared from view, Evelyn let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands were still trembling, and she clutched the edge of the bench for support, her body feeling weak and drained. She had never experienced fear like that before, and it left her feeling shaken to the core. But as she sat there, trying to process what had just happened, something unexpected occurred. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before she knew it, she was crying, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. It wasn't just fear that she was feeling. It was a profound sadness, a grief that had been buried for so long that it had become a part of her. She cried for the boy, for the life that had led him to this point, for the choices he had made and the ones that had been made for him. She cried for the world, for the hatred and fear that seemed to be spreading like a poison, infecting even the smallest, most innocent places. And she cried for herself, for the loneliness she had been carrying for so long, for the loss of her husband, for the children she had never had, for the life that had passed her by. As the tears streamed down her face, Evelyn felt a strange sense of release, as if the weight she had been carrying for so long was finally lifting. The encounter with the boys had shaken her, but it had also awakened something within her, a realization that life was fragile, that time was precious, and that she couldn't afford to let fear rule her life. When the tears finally subsided, Evelyn wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and took a deep breath. She felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The park was quiet again, the tension that had hung in the air now dissipated, and the world seemed to return to its normal rhythm. Evelyn sat there for a few more minutes, gathering her thoughts, before slowly rising to her feet. She felt different somehow, stronger, more resolute. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she couldn't live in fear, that she had to find a way to move forward, to live her life with courage and compassion. As she made her way out of the park, Evelyn took one last look at the bench, at the spot where everything had changed. She knew that she would never forget this day, that it would stay with her for the rest of her life. But she also knew that it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that she was ready to face, no matter what it might bring. Evelyn walked slowly back to her modest home, the morning sun warming her skin, though she felt a chill deep inside. The small white house on Maple Street had been her sanctuary for decades, a place where memories whispered from every corner. As she approached, she noticed the garden her late husband Harold had tended with such love. The roses, now in full bloom, seemed to bow gently in the breeze, as if acknowledging her return. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Evelyn hung her hat on the familiar peg by the door, her fingers lingering on the brim as if it could somehow connect her to the past. She moved through the rooms with a practiced grace, each step echoing in the stillness. The living room, with its faded floral wallpaper and worn armchair, bore the weight of years spent in contented silence, broken only by the occasional visit from neighbors or the delivery of groceries. Her thoughts drifted back to the park, to the encounter that had left her shaken. The image of the boy with the knife was still fresh in her mind, but it was his eyes that haunted her. The brief glimpse of something vulnerable, something lost. She couldn't shake the feeling that he had been more afraid than she was, that he had been teetering on the edge of a decision that could have changed both their lives forever. In the kitchen, Evelyn set the kettle on the stove, the familiar ritual offering a small comfort. She reached for a jar of tea leaves, her hands moving with the ease of habit. As the water heated, her gaze fell upon the old wooden table, where she and Harold had shared countless meals and quiet conversations. The table was scarred with the marks of a life well lived, each scratch and dent a reminder of moments past. The kettle whistled, pulling her from her reverie. She poured the boiling water over the tea leaves, watching as they unfurled, releasing their delicate aroma. As she waited for the tea to steep, her thoughts wandered back to the boy. She wondered where he was now, what he was doing, and whether he was safe. The idea that someone so young could be caught up in a world of violence and hate troubled her deeply. She carried the cup of tea to the small table by the window, where the sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow over the room. Sitting down, she sipped the hot liquid, its warmth spreading through her, easing the tension in her muscles. She looked out at the garden, at the roses Harold had planted, and felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it took her breath away. Harold had been gone for 5 years, and though the pain of his loss had dulled over time, there were moments when it felt as fresh as the day he had passed. He had been her rock, her partner, her best friend. They had built a life together, a life that had been simple but full of love. Now she was alone, left to navigate the world without him by her side. But today had shaken something loose in her, something she hadn't felt in a long time, a desire to do more, to be more than just a shadow of the woman she had once been. The encounter in the park had stirred emotions she thought had withered with age, a reminder that there was still time, still purpose to be found. Evelyn set her cup down and stood, the resolve building within her like a tide. She moved to the hallway where a small, dust-covered box sat on the top shelf of the closet. She hadn't opened it in years, not since Harold had passed, but now it seemed to call to her. She pulled the box down and carried it to the living room, setting it on the coffee table. Inside were photos, letters, and mementos from a life lived with passion and purpose. She sifted through them, her fingers tracing the edges of old photographs, her heart swelling with the memories they invoked. There was a photo of Harold in his garden, a smile on his face as he held up a particularly large tomato. Another of the two of them at the beach, laughing as the wind whipped through their hair. Beneath the photos, she found a small notebook, its pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully, her breath catching as she recognized Harold's handwriting. It was a journal of sorts, though he had never called it that. Just a place where he had jotted down his thoughts, his dreams, his plans for the future. Plans that, in many ways, had never come to fruition. As she read, Evelyn felt a deep connection to the man she had loved for so long, a man who had always believed in doing good, in helping others, in making a difference. And she realized, with a clarity that startled her, that she could do the same. She didn't know where to start, didn't know what she could offer at her age, but she knew she had to try. She couldn't just sit and watch the world pass her by. Not anymore. The day passed in a blur of planning and reflection. By evening, Evelyn had made a decision. She would start small, reach out to the community, see where she could be of use. Perhaps she could volunteer at the local school, help children who needed a little extra support, or visit the elderly who were even more alone than she was. There were so many possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of excitement, a sense of purpose. As night fell, Evelyn stood by the window looking out at the garden now bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The roses stood tall and proud, a testament to Harold's care and love. She smiled, feeling his presence beside her, encouraging her, as he always had. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and setbacks. But she also knew that she couldn't let fear or doubt hold her back. There was still so much she could do, so much she could give. And as she prepared for bed, a sense of peace settled over her, a quiet determination that would guide her in the days to come. Evelyn Johnson wasn't ready to give up, not yet. There was life left to live, and she intended to live it fully, with all the grace, strength, and compassion she could muster. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room as Evelyn opened her eyes. She lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the world waking up outside her window. The events of the previous day were still fresh in her mind, but today there was a new sense of purpose. She hadn't felt this alive in years, and though the path ahead was uncertain, the thought of it filled her with a quiet anticipation. After a simple breakfast, she took a long look at herself in the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was that of a woman who had lived a full life, yet there was a spark in her eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. She reached for her pearl earrings, a gift from Harold on their 50th anniversary, and fastened them with care. Today was important. She didn't know why, but she felt it in her bones. The walk to town was peaceful, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. The leaves on the trees had begun to turn, their vibrant hues a reminder of the beauty in change. As she walked, Evelyn thought about where she might start. The school was her first idea, but as she passed by the church, she noticed a small sign out front: volunteers needed for community outreach. Curiosity piqued, she pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The scent of old wood and candle wax greeted her, along with the soft murmur of voices coming from a side room. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to commit to anything just yet, but something drew her forward. Inside the room, a group of people were gathered around a large table, sorting through piles of clothes, canned goods, and other donations. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes noticed Evelyn standing in the doorway and smiled warmly. "Hello there. Can I help you with something?" she asked, her voice gentle and inviting. Evelyn took a step forward, her nerves easing slightly. "I saw the sign outside about volunteers. I was wondering if you could use an extra pair of hands." The woman's smile broadened. "We can always use more help. My name is Clara. Why don't you join us? We're preparing care packages for families in need." Evelyn nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She moved to the table and was immediately handed a stack of children's clothing to fold. As she worked, she listened to the chatter around her, the easy camaraderie of people working together for a common cause. It was comforting, grounding her in the present moment. Hours passed, and by the time they finished, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows. The room was filled with neatly packed boxes, each one a small gesture of kindness, ready to be distributed to those who needed them most. Clara turned to Evelyn as they finished. "Thank you so much for helping today. It's wonderful to have someone new join us." Evelyn smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "It was my pleasure. I'd like to come back if that's all right." "We'd love that," Clara said, her eyes twinkling. "We meet every Tuesday and Thursday. You're welcome any time." As Evelyn made her way back home, she felt a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't experienced in years. The day had passed in a blur of activity, but it had left her feeling more connected, more alive. She realized that she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for, a sense of community, of belonging. That evening, as she sat in her cozy living room, a cup of tea warming her hands, Evelyn thought about the people she had met today. She thought about Clara, with her kind eyes and warm smile, and the others who had welcomed her so openly. They were ordinary people, just like her, trying to make a difference in whatever small way they could. And in doing so, they had made her feel less alone. The days that followed were filled with similar moments. She returned to the church regularly, getting to know the other volunteers, sharing stories, and lending a hand wherever it was needed. Each time she left, she felt a little lighter, the burden of loneliness easing just a bit more. But it wasn't just the work that fulfilled her, it was the connections she was forming. There was Mary, an elderly widow like herself, who had lost her husband a few years ago and found solace in helping others. And then there was young Emily, a single mother struggling to make ends meet, whose bright smile and infectious laughter brought joy to everyone around her. As the weeks passed, Evelyn found herself looking forward to these gatherings, to the simple act of being around others who understood the quiet struggles of life. She began to see that in giving her time and energy, she was receiving far more in return: friendship, purpose, and a renewed sense of hope. One crisp morning, as Evelyn walked into the church hall, she noticed a new face among the volunteers. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, stood awkwardly by the door, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his worn jacket. He looked out of place, unsure of what to do or where to go. Evelyn approached him with a gentle smile. "Hello there. I'm Evelyn. Are you here to help?" The young man looked at her, his eyes wary, but there was a softness beneath his guarded expression. "I'm not sure. I just wanted to see what this was all about." "We're glad you're here," Evelyn said, her voice warm and welcoming. "There's plenty to do. Why don't you come and join us?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded, following her to the table where the others were gathered. As they worked side by side, Evelyn couldn't help but notice how he kept to himself, speaking only when spoken to, his eyes often drifting to the door as if contemplating leaving. Over time, however, he began to relax, his guarded demeanor softening as he became more comfortable with the group. Evelyn learned that his name was Michael and that he had recently moved to town, looking for a fresh start. He didn't share much about his past, but Evelyn sensed that he had seen his fair share of hardship. One afternoon, as they packed boxes together, Michael finally opened up, just a little. "I used to run with the wrong crowd," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "But I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to do something better with my life." Evelyn looked at him, her heart aching for the young man who was clearly struggling to find his way. She reached out and gently touched his arm. "We all have our pasts, Michael. What matters is what we do with our future." He looked up at her then, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to be better." "You're already on the right path," Evelyn said softly, "and you're not alone. We're all here to support each other." As they continued their work, Evelyn couldn't help but think about the boy in the park. She wondered if he, too, was trying to find his way, if he, too, was struggling to break free from a life that had led him down a dark path. And she realized that in helping Michael, she was helping herself heal from the fear and sadness that had gripped her that day. The days turned into weeks, and soon the leaves began to fall from the trees, blanketing the ground in a rich tapestry of red, orange, and gold. The little church community continued to grow, drawing in more people who were searching for connection, for meaning, for a place to belong. And through it all, Evelyn found herself becoming stronger, more confident, and more at peace. She had started this journey alone, but now she was surrounded by people who cared, who understood, and who were there to walk with her every step of the way. The early morning fog clung to the streets as Evelyn made her way to the small church, the cool air invigorating against her skin. She had fallen into a comfortable rhythm over the past weeks, her days filled with purpose and new friendships. Today, however, felt different, as if the day carried an undercurrent she couldn't quite place. As she approached the church, she noticed Michael already there, leaning against the old stone wall, staring off into the distance. His posture was tense, his expression distant, and Evelyn could sense that something was weighing heavily on his mind. "Good morning, Michael," she said gently, coming to stand beside him. "You're here early." He turned to her, offering a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, his voice laced with something she couldn't quite identify. "Just needed to get out, clear my head." Evelyn nodded, understanding the need to escape the confines of restless thoughts. She had been there many times herself, wandering the empty streets in the early hours when sleep evaded her. "Would you like to talk about it?" she offered, sensing that he needed to unburden himself. Michael hesitated, his gaze flickering to the ground as if considering whether to speak or remain silent. Finally, he exhaled, the sound carrying the weight of something long buried. "It's my past," he began slowly, the words coming out almost reluctantly. "I thought I could leave it behind, but it's catching up to me." Evelyn remained quiet, giving him the space to continue. She had learned that sometimes people needed to work through their thoughts without interruption. Michael's voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke again. "I used to be involved with a group, people who weren't good for me. I did things I'm not proud of, things that haunt me every day. I thought I could start over here, but I don't know if I deserve it." The vulnerability in his words cut through the cool morning air, raw and unfiltered. Evelyn felt a deep sadness for him, for the burden he carried, and a fierce determination to help him find his way. She reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "Everyone has things in their past they wish they could change," she said softly. "But what matters is what you do now, how you choose to live your life moving forward." Michael looked at her then, his eyes searching hers as if seeking reassurance, understanding, something to hold on to. "I'm trying," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But sometimes it feels like the past is too heavy, like I'll never be able to escape it." Evelyn gave his arm a gentle squeeze, her voice steady. "You don't have to carry it alone, Michael. You have people here who care about you, who want to help you. You're not defined by your past, but by the choices you make now." The words seemed to resonate with him, and she saw the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. He took a deep breath, as if trying to absorb the meaning behind her words. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know where I'd be without this place, without you." Evelyn offered him a warm smile, her heart swelling with affection for this young man who had come so far, yet still had a long road ahead of him. "You're stronger than you think, Michael, and you're not alone." They stood there for a few moments longer, the morning quiet around them, before making their way inside. The day unfolded much like the others, with the volunteers gathering, sharing stories, and working together with a sense of camaraderie that had become second nature. Yet throughout the day, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was still troubling Michael. She kept a close eye on him, noticing the way he would occasionally drift into his thoughts, his expression clouding with worry. As the afternoon wore on and the last of the boxes were packed, Clara called for a break, suggesting they all gather for tea in the small kitchen at the back of the church. The group welcomed the respite, and soon they were seated around the worn wooden table, cups of steaming tea in hand, the conversation flowing easily. But Evelyn's attention remained on Michael, who sat quietly at the edge of the group, his gaze distant. She decided then and there that she wouldn't let him leave without finding out what was truly bothering him. As the others chatted and laughed, she leaned over, her voice low and concerned. "Michael, would you like to take a walk with me after this?" He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes before he nodded, gratefulness in his expression. "I'd like that." Once they finished their tea and the group began to disperse, Evelyn and Michael slipped out the back door into the cool afternoon. They walked in silence for a while, the leaves crunching underfoot, the sounds of the town fading as they headed toward the park. Evelyn knew the park was a place of reflection for her, and she hoped it might offer Michael the same solace. When they reached the pond, Evelyn led him to a bench beneath an old oak tree, the same one she had sat on so many times before. They sat down, the quiet of the park surrounding them, a peaceful contrast to the turmoil she sensed in Michael. "I came here once," Michael began, his voice low and steady. "When I first arrived in town, I didn't know where to go, what to do. I just needed to think. This place, it's quiet. It gave me space to figure out what I wanted." Evelyn listened, her heart aching for the boy he must have been, lost and searching for something he couldn't name. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the conflict between wanting to move forward and being held back by the shadows of his past. "I want to be different," he said, almost as if he were confessing. "I want to make something of myself, but it's hard when you've lived a certain way for so long. It's hard to believe that you can change." Evelyn reached over, taking his hand in hers, her grip firm yet gentle. "You've already started to change, Michael. You've taken the first step by being here, by wanting something more for yourself. That's not easy, but it's the most important step you could take." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. "But what if I slip? What if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough?" She squeezed his hand, her voice soft but full of conviction. "Then you'll pick yourself up and keep going, and we'll be here to help you. No one expects you to be perfect, Michael. We just want you to keep trying." Michael's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and he looked away, blinking them back. "I've never had anyone believe in me like that," he admitted quietly. "It's hard to accept that I might deserve it." Evelyn felt her own eyes grow misty at his words. She saw so much of her younger self in him, the fear, the uncertainty, the longing for acceptance. She wanted to tell him that he did deserve it, that he was worth every bit of the effort he was putting in, but she knew he had to come to that realization on his own. Instead, she simply sat with him, offering him her presence, her support, in the quiet way that had become second nature to her. They sat together until the sun began to dip below the horizon, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. As the first stars began to twinkle above, Michael finally spoke, his voice filled with a quiet determination. "I'm going to keep trying. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm going to keep trying." Evelyn smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride in him. "That's all anyone can ask for, Michael, and I'll be here, every step of the way." They rose from the bench, walking slowly back toward the town, the night air cool and crisp around them. Evelyn knew that this was just the beginning for Michael, that there would be challenges and setbacks along the way. But she also knew that he had taken a step that day, a step toward a future filled with hope, and that was enough for now. The days grew shorter as autumn settled fully over the town, the air carrying a crispness that hinted at the approaching winter. Evelyn found herself more frequently at the church, where the sense of community had become a balm to her once lonely existence. Each visit brought with it a deeper connection to the people around her, and she began to see the subtle ways in which they supported one another, weaving a delicate but strong fabric of care and kindness. One morning, as Evelyn arrived at the church, she noticed something different in the air, a quiet buzz of anticipation that seemed to ripple through the group. Clara was standing at the front of the room, her usual calm demeanor tinged with excitement. When everyone had gathered, she cleared her throat, drawing their attention. "Good morning, everyone," Clara began, her smile warm as she looked out at the familiar faces. "I wanted to share some news with you all. We've been asked to participate in a new initiative, a youth mentorship program. The idea is to pair adults in the community with young people who could benefit from a bit of guidance and support. I thought this might be something we'd all be interested in." Evelyn felt a stirring in her chest, a flicker of something she hadn't anticipated. The idea of helping a young person navigate life, of being a source of stability and wisdom, resonated with her deeply. She glanced around the room and saw similar expressions of interest and curiosity on the faces of her fellow volunteers. Clara continued, "If anyone feels called to participate, there's a sign-up sheet over by the door. We'll be working with the local high school to identify students who might need a little extra support. It's a wonderful opportunity to make a real difference." As the meeting ended and the group began to disperse, Evelyn found herself lingering near the sign-up sheet, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She thought of Michael, of how lost he had seemed when he first arrived, and how far he had come with just a bit of encouragement and a listening ear. The thought that she might be able to offer that to someone else filled her with a quiet determination. Without another moment of hesitation, Evelyn picked up the pen and added her name to the list. A few days later, Evelyn received a phone call from the program coordinator at the high school, a woman named Mrs. Hart. They arranged a meeting, and Evelyn found herself seated in the school's modest office, the scent of chalk and old textbooks bringing back memories she hadn't touched in years. Mrs. Hart was a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s, with sharp eyes softened by a genuine warmth. She explained the program in more detail, how it aimed to help students who were struggling, whether academically, socially, or emotionally. Each mentor would be paired with a student, and they would meet regularly to talk, offer guidance, and simply be there as a steady presence. As Mrs. Hart spoke, Evelyn's thoughts drifted to her own school days, to the challenges she had faced, and the mentors who had made a difference in her life. She felt a sense of responsibility, of wanting to give back in a way that felt deeply meaningful. "We have a few students in mind who might benefit from your guidance," Mrs. Hart was saying, pulling Evelyn from her thoughts. "But there's one in particular I think you'd be perfect for. Her name is Lily. She's a bright girl, but she's had a rough time lately. Family issues, falling behind in her classes, that sort of thing. She could really use someone like you." Evelyn nodded, feeling a tug at her heartstrings as she listened. She didn't know this Lily yet, but she already felt a connection, a desire to help her find her way. "When can I meet her?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady with purpose. Mrs. Hart smiled, her approval evident. "How about tomorrow afternoon? I can arrange for you two to meet here after school." Evelyn agreed, and the next day found her back at the school, waiting nervously in the office. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she was determined to be whatever this young girl needed: a mentor, a friend, a source of comfort in a confusing world. When the door opened, Evelyn looked up to see a girl of about 16 standing hesitantly in the doorway. Lily was small for her age, with a shock of dark hair that fell over her eyes and a guarded expression that spoke of someone who had learned not to trust too easily. She looked at Evelyn with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, as if unsure of what to make of this older woman sitting there, waiting for her. "Hi, Lily," Evelyn said gently, standing to greet her. "I'm Evelyn. It's so nice to meet you." Lily offered a tentative smile, her eyes darting around the room before finally settling on Evelyn. "Hi," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn gestured to the chair beside her. "Would you like to sit down? We can just talk for a bit, get to know each other." Lily nodded slowly and took a seat, her posture stiff and uncertain. Evelyn could see the tension in the girl's shoulders, the way she kept her arms crossed tightly, as if to protect herself from whatever might come next. They began to talk, slowly at first, Evelyn asking simple questions about school, about Lily's interests, anything to get her to open up a little. It took time, but gradually, the girl's defenses began to lower, her answers growing longer, her voice gaining a bit more confidence. Evelyn learned that Lily loved to draw, that she had a sketchbook she carried with her everywhere, though she was too shy to show anyone her work. She also learned that Lily's parents were going through a difficult divorce, that the turmoil at home had caused her to retreat into herself, her grades slipping as she struggled to cope. As Lily spoke, Evelyn listened carefully, offering support without judgment, her heart going out to this young girl who was carrying so much on her small shoulders. She knew that just being there, just listening, was already making a difference, even if Lily couldn't see it yet. By the end of their first meeting, Lily was sitting a little more comfortably, her gaze meeting Evelyn's more frequently, a small sign of trust beginning to form. They agreed to meet again the following week, and as Lily left, Evelyn felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had taken the first step in helping this girl find her way. The weeks passed, and with each meeting, Evelyn saw Lily begin to open up more, her guard lowering as she came to trust the older woman who had become a steady presence in her life. They talked about everything: art, school, the challenges of growing up in a world that often felt overwhelming. Evelyn shared stories from her own youth, offering advice when asked, but mostly just listening, letting Lily know that she wasn't alone. It wasn't long before Lily began to show Evelyn her drawings, delicate and intricate works of art that revealed a depth of emotion and creativity that took Evelyn's breath away. She encouraged Lily to pursue her passion, to believe in her talent, and watched with pride as the girl began to gain confidence in herself, her grades improving as she found a sense of purpose and direction. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park, Lily turned to Evelyn, a shy smile playing on her lips. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the sincerity of her words. Evelyn reached over and squeezed Lily's hand gently. "You're stronger than you think, Lily. You've had it in you all along. I'm just glad I could be here to help you see that." As they continued to talk, Evelyn felt a deep contentment settle over her. She had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for, an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life, to give back in a way that mattered. And in doing so, she had discovered a new sense of purpose, one that filled her days with meaning and her heart with joy. Winter arrived in Cloverfield with a quiet elegance, draping the town in a blanket of snow that sparkled under the pale winter sun. The once vibrant leaves had long fallen, leaving the trees bare, their branches etched against the gray sky like delicate ink strokes on parchment. The crisp air carried the scent of wood smoke, and the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow became the background music of the season. Evelyn wrapped her scarf more tightly around her neck as she made her way to the church, the cold nipping at her cheeks. The warmth of the building was a welcome contrast to the chill outside, and as she stepped inside, she was greeted by the familiar hum of activity. The volunteers were busy preparing for the annual holiday drive. a tradition that had grown over the years, providing food, clothing, and gifts to families in need. Clara was at the center of it all, orchestrating the event with her usual calm efficiency. She caught sight of Evelyn and waved her over, her face lighting up with a smile. "Evelyn, I'm so glad you're here. We could use your help organizing the donations." Evelyn nodded, rolling up her sleeves as she joined the others at the sorting table. The room was filled with the sound of laughter and conversation, a sense of camaraderie that warmed her from the inside out. As she sorted through the donated items, her mind wandered to Lily, wondering how the girl was faring with the holidays approaching. Their meetings had continued regularly, and Evelyn had watched with quiet pride as Lily began to thrive, her confidence growing with each passing week. But she knew that the holidays could be a difficult time, especially for someone dealing with a fractured family. She resolved to check in with Lily later to make sure she was doing all right. As the day wore on, Evelyn found herself working alongside Michael, who had become a steady presence at the church. His transformation over the past months had been remarkable, and he had become an integral part of the volunteer group, his easygoing nature endearing him to everyone. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, before Michael broke the quiet with a question that seemed to come from deep within him. "Evelyn," he began, his voice thoughtful, "do you ever wonder if things would have turned out differently if you'd made different choices, if you'd taken a different path?" The question caught Evelyn off guard, but she took a moment to consider it, her hands still busy with the task in front of her. "I think we all wonder about that at times," she replied slowly. "But life has a way of leading us where we need to go, even if it doesn't always make sense at the time." Michael nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "I just can't help but think about the choices I made, the people I hurt. Sometimes it feels like no matter what I do now, it can't undo what's already been done." Evelyn looked at him, seeing the weight of his past still pressing on his shoulders, even as he worked so hard to move forward. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, grounding him in the moment. "The past is something we can't change," she said gently. "But every day you have the chance to make different choices, to be the person you want to be. That's what matters." Michael absorbed her words, his expression softening as he met her gaze. "You're right," he said quietly. "I just need to keep reminding myself of that." They continued their work, the conversation settling into a comfortable silence. Evelyn found herself reflecting on her own life, on the choices she had made, the paths she had taken. She thought of Harold, of the life they had built together, and of the years since his passing. There had been times when she wondered what her life might have been like if things had been different, but she had long since made peace with those thoughts. Now, she was focused on the present, on the people she could help, and the small but meaningful ways she could make a difference. As the day drew to a close and the last of the boxes were packed, Evelyn decided to pay Lily a visit. She knew that the holidays could be a lonely time, and she wanted to make sure that Lily knew she wasn't alone. The walk to Lily's house took Evelyn through the heart of Cloverfield, the town's streets dusted with snow, the shop windows decorated with festive lights and garlands. The air was filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of carolers, their voices carrying a note of cheer that contrasted with the quiet reflection Evelyn felt as she approached Lily's home. When she arrived, she knocked gently on the door, her breath visible in the cold air as she waited. After a moment, the door creaked open, and Lily appeared, her face lighting up with surprise and happiness at the sight of Evelyn. "Evelyn, I didn't expect to see you," Lily said, stepping back to let her in. The warmth of the house was a welcome change from the cold outside, and Evelyn smiled as she removed her coat, handing it to Lily. "I wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing," Evelyn said as she followed Lily into the cozy living room. The room was small but inviting, a fire crackling in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the space. There was a small tree in the corner decorated with handmade ornaments and a few wrapped gifts underneath. Lily seemed pleased by the visit, and they settled on the couch, mugs of hot cocoa in hand. They talked about school, about art, and about the holiday preparations. But Evelyn could sense there was something on Lily's mind, something she wasn't quite ready to share. After a while, Evelyn gently broached the subject. Lily, how are things at home? I know the holidays can be a difficult time, especially with everything you've been going through. Lily hesitated, her gaze dropping to her mug, fingers tracing the rim absently. It's hard, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom and Dad, they're trying to keep it together for me, but I can tell it's not the same. We're all just pretending, I guess, and it hurts. Evelyn reached over, placing a comforting hand on Lily's arm, her heart aching for the young girl. I'm so sorry, Lily. I know how hard that must be. But you don't have to go through it alone. I'm here for you whenever you need to talk, or if you just need to get away for a bit. Lily looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Thank you, Evelyn. It means a lot to know that someone cares. Evelyn squeezed her arm gently, offering a reassuring smile. You're a strong young woman, Lily. I know it's tough, but you're going to get through this, and I'll be here every step of the way. They sat together in silence for a while, the crackling fire filling the room with a comforting warmth. As the evening wore on, Evelyn could see the tension in Lily begin to ease, her posture relaxing as she allowed herself to simply be without the weight of pretending. Eventually, it was time for Evelyn to leave, and as she stood to go, Lily surprised her by wrapping her in a tight hug. Thank you for everything, Evelyn, Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you. Evelyn held her close, feeling a deep sense of connection to this young girl who had become so dear to her. You're never alone, Lily, she said softly. Remember that. As she stepped out into the night, the snow falling softly around her, Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The world was quiet, the only sound the gentle crunch of snow beneath her feet as she made her way home. The lights from the houses twinkled like stars, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt completely at ease, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The new year began quietly, the town of Cloverfield still blanketed in the remnants of winter. Snow clung to the rooftops and lined the streets, but there was a sense of renewal in the air, as if the world was slowly waking up from a long, peaceful sleep. The holiday decorations had been taken down, and the days were slowly growing longer, bringing with them the first hints of spring. Evelyn found herself more occupied than ever, the rhythm of her life now intertwined with the lives of those she had come to care for so deeply. Her visits to the church continued, each one filled with the familiar warmth of friendship and purpose. She often found herself thinking about Michael and Lily, two young souls who had come into her life at just the right time and who had given her days new meaning. One afternoon, as she was leaving the church, Evelyn spotted Michael sitting alone on a bench in the small park across the street. He was bundled up against the cold, his breath visible in the crisp air as he stared off into the distance, lost in thought. She hesitated for a moment, sensing that he might need some time alone, but something in his posture, a subtle slump of the shoulders, a heaviness in the way he sat, made her walk over to him. Mind if I join you? Evelyn asked gently, her voice soft as she approached. Michael looked up, surprised to see her, but he nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Of course, he replied, shifting slightly to make room for her on the bench. They sat together in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the last of the snowflakes drifted down from the sky. Evelyn waited patiently, sensing that Michael had something on his mind, something he was struggling to articulate. Eventually, he spoke, his voice low and hesitant. Evelyn, do you ever feel like you're not sure where you belong? Like you're just drifting? The question hung in the air between them, fragile and full of unspoken emotion. Evelyn turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face for clues to what had prompted the question. Sometimes, she admitted softly, choosing her words with care. There have been moments in my life when I've felt lost, unsure of where I was headed or what I was supposed to do. But I've learned that those feelings don't last forever. They're just part of the process of finding your way. Michael nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. I've been trying so hard to do better, to be better, but there are days when I feel like I'm just faking it, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not, and eventually people are going to see through it. Evelyn's heart ached for him, for the quiet battle he was fighting every day to leave his past behind. She reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm, grounding him in the moment. Michael, what you're feeling is completely normal. Change isn't easy, and it's natural to have doubts along the way. But you're not pretending. You're growing, and that takes time. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't keep this up? You are strong enough, Evelyn said firmly, her voice steady. I've seen it in you, in the way you've been working to turn your life around. You're doing more than you realize, and you're not alone. We're all here to support you no matter what. Michael absorbed her words, his expression softening as he processed what she had said. Thank you, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know where I'd be without you. Evelyn smiled, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. You're doing just fine, Michael. Keep taking it one day at a time, and remember that you're never alone in this. They sat together for a while longer, the silence between them comfortable and filled with understanding. Eventually, Michael stood, pulling his coat tighter around him. I should get going, he said, his voice lighter now, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But thank you, Evelyn. I really needed to hear that. Evelyn watched him walk away, her heart full of pride and affection for the young man who had become so dear to her. She knew he still had a long way to go, but she also knew that he was on the right path, and that was enough for now. The following week, Evelyn made her way to Lily's house for their regular meeting. The snow had begun to melt, revealing patches of grass beneath, and the air carried the faint scent of earth and new beginnings. She knocked on the door, and Lily greeted her with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Evelyn, I've been waiting for you, Lily said, practically bouncing on her toes as she led her inside. I have something to show you. Evelyn followed Lily into the living room, where a large canvas was set up on an easel near the window. It was covered with a sheet, and Lily stood beside it, her hands clasped in front of her as she looked at Evelyn expectantly. Go on, Lily urged, her voice filled with nervous energy. Take a look. Evelyn stepped forward, her heart fluttering with anticipation as she reached out to lift the sheet. When she pulled it away, she gasped, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the painting before her. It was a portrait of a woman standing alone in a field of wildflowers. The sky above her was a swirl of vibrant colors, pinks, purples, and blues that seemed to dance and move as if alive. The woman's face was serene, her eyes closed as she tilted her head back, basking in the warmth of the sun. The entire piece was filled with light and life, a celebration of beauty and peace. It's you, Lily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I painted it for you, Evelyn, to thank you for everything you've done for me. Evelyn felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she gazed at the painting, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion it conveyed. Lily, it's beautiful, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Lily replied, her eyes shining with happiness. I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me. You've helped me so much, more than you could ever know. Evelyn turned to Lily, pulling her into a tight embrace, her heart overflowing with love for the girl who had become like a daughter to her. Thank you, Lily, she said, her voice thick with emotion. This means more to me than you could ever imagine. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the sun streamed in through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. It was a moment of pure, unspoken connection, one that Evelyn knew she would treasure forever. As the weeks turned into months, the snow melted away completely, giving way to the fresh greens of spring. The town of Cloverfield began to bloom once more, the trees bursting with new leaves, and the flowers pushing their way up through the soft earth. It was a season of renewal, a time of growth and possibility. Evelyn continued her visits to the church, to Michael, to Lily, her days filled with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she was making a difference no matter how small. She found herself more content than she had been in years, her heart lighter, her spirit renewed. One afternoon, as she was tending to her garden, Evelyn heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Clara standing at the gate, a smile on her face as she waved. Evelyn, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Clara said as she entered the garden, her eyes taking in the vibrant flowers that surrounded them. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron, smiling warmly at her friend. "I'm glad you did. Come, sit with me." They settled on a bench beneath the shade of a large oak tree, the scent of blossoms filling the air around them. Clara sighed contentedly, leaning back against the bench as she looked out over the garden. "You've done a wonderful job here, Evelyn," Clara said, her voice filled with admiration. "It's like a little slice of paradise." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It brings me peace working in the garden. There's something soothing about watching things grow, tending to them, helping them thrive." Clara nodded, her gaze softening as she turned to look at Evelyn. "You've always had a gift for that, you know. Not just with plants, but with people, too. I've seen the way you've helped Michael and Lily, the way you've brought them out of their shells. It's truly remarkable." Evelyn felt a blush creep up her cheeks, humbled by Clara's words. "I just did what felt right," she said softly. "They needed someone, and I was there. That's all." Clara reached over and took Evelyn's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You're too modest, Evelyn. What you've done for them is extraordinary. You've given them hope, a sense of belonging. That's no small thing." They sat together in silence for a while, the breeze rustling the leaves above them, carrying with it the promise of warmer days to come. Evelyn felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her, the kind that comes from knowing that you are exactly where you are meant to be, doing exactly what you are meant to do. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, Evelyn and Clara rose from the bench, their conversation drifting to lighter topics as they made their way back to the gate. Before she left, Clara turned to Evelyn, her expression thoughtful. "Evelyn, I've been thinking, we're always looking for ways to expand our outreach at the church to do more for the community, and I was wondering if you might consider leading a new program, something focused on mentoring and support, like what you've been doing with Michael and Lily. You have such a natural talent for it, and I think it could make a real difference." Evelyn was taken aback by the suggestion, her mind racing as she considered the possibility. She had never thought of herself as a leader, but the idea of creating something that could help others, something lasting and meaningful, sparked a fire in her heart. "I'll think about it," Evelyn replied, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "Thank you, Clara, for believing in me." Clara smiled, a look of satisfaction in her eyes. "I have no doubt that whatever you choose to do, it will be something special." As Clara walked away, Evelyn stood at the gate, watching her friend disappear down the path. She felt a sense of anticipation building within her, the possibilities unfolding like the petals of a flower, each one more beautiful than the last. She knew there was still so much she could do, so many lives she could touch, and the thought filled her with a quiet, determined energy. She turned back to her garden, the colors of the flowers vibrant in the fading light. It was a new season, and with it came new opportunities, new challenges, and new beginnings. Evelyn felt ready to embrace them all with an open heart and a renewed sense of purpose. Spring had fully blossomed in Cloverfield, the town transformed by a riot of colors and the scent of fresh blooms. The streets were alive with people, their steps lighter, their voices lifted in laughter as they enjoyed the warmth of the sun after the long winter. Evelyn's garden, too, was a celebration of life. Roses, tulips, and daffodils swayed gently in the breeze, their vibrant petals catching the light. Evelyn stood in her garden, her hands deep in the earth as she tended to her plants, feeling a sense of satisfaction that came from nurturing life. She had spent the past few weeks considering Clara's suggestion, the idea of starting a new program at the church. It was a daunting thought, but one that excited her, filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. The doorbell rang, pulling Evelyn from her thoughts. She wiped her hands on her apron as she made her way to the front door. When she opened it, she was greeted by the sight of Michael and Lily standing side by side, their faces beaming with excitement. "Evelyn!" Lily exclaimed, her voice filled with joy. "We have a surprise for you!" Evelyn raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at her lips. "A surprise, you say? Well, now you've got me curious." Michael stepped forward, holding a small, neatly wrapped package in his hands. "We wanted to thank you," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "for everything you've done for us. Lily nodded enthusiastically, her eyes shining with happiness. "You've been like a guardian angel, Evelyn. We wouldn't be where we are without you." Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat as she accepted the package, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at the two young people in front of her, both of whom had come so far, and her heart swelled with pride and love. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You two have brought so much joy into my life. I'm so proud of both of you." With shaking fingers, Evelyn carefully unwrapped the package. Inside, she found a beautifully bound journal, the cover embossed with delicate floral designs. She opened it to the first page, where she found a handwritten note from both Michael and Lily. "Dear Evelyn, this journal is for you, to document all the amazing things you're going to do. We know you have so much left to give, so many lives to touch. Thank you for believing in us, for guiding us, and for being our light when things seemed darkest. We love you, with all our hearts, Michael and Lily." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes as she read the note, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She looked up at Michael and Lily, seeing the love and admiration in their eyes, and felt a profound sense of connection to them both. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice trembling. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." Lily stepped forward, wrapping Evelyn in a tight embrace. "You deserve it," she said softly. "You've given us so much. Now it's time for you to continue spreading that light to others." Michael nodded, his expression serious but full of warmth. "You've inspired us, Evelyn. We know you can do something amazing with that program at the church, and we'll be here to help you every step of the way." Evelyn held them both close, feeling the strength and love in their embrace. In that moment, she knew that the future was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace them all. The fear and uncertainty that had once held her back were gone, replaced by a deep sense of purpose and the knowledge that she was surrounded by people who believed in her. The following week, Evelyn met with Clara to discuss the details of the new program. They sat together in the church office, their heads bent over a stack of papers as they planned and brainstormed, their ideas flowing easily between them. "We'll focus on mentoring," Evelyn said, her voice filled with conviction, "but we'll also offer workshops, life skills, creative arts, anything that can help these young people find their way." Clara nodded, a smile of approval on her face. "I think it's going to be something special, Evelyn. You have a gift for this, and I know it's going to make a real difference in the community." As they continued to plan, Evelyn felt a sense of excitement building within her. She could see the potential in what they were creating, the impact it could have on so many lives, and she knew that this was just the beginning. By the time the first meeting of the new program arrived, Evelyn was ready. The church hall had been transformed into a welcoming space, filled with comfortable chairs, colorful posters, and a sense of hope that seemed to radiate from the walls. The room was filled with young people, their faces a mix of curiosity, apprehension, and excitement. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding with anticipation as she looked out at the group. She recognized some faces, students from the high school, others who had been coming to the church for years, and she saw new faces, too, young people who had come seeking something they couldn't quite name. "Welcome," she began, her voice steady and warm. "I'm so glad you're all here. This program is for you, for all of us, really. It's a place where we can come together, learn from each other, and support one another. Whatever you're going through, whatever challenges you're facing, you don't have to face them alone." As she spoke, Evelyn felt the energy in the room shift, the initial nervousness giving way to something more: trust, hope, a sense of belonging. She knew that this was the start of something important, something that could grow and flourish in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Over the weeks and months that followed, the program blossomed. The young people who attended began to open up, sharing their stories, their dreams, and their fears. They formed bonds with one another, finding strength in their shared experiences, and they looked to Evelyn as a mentor, a guide, and a friend. Michael became a regular presence at the meetings, often leading discussions or offering advice based on his own experiences. He had found his place in the world, and he was eager to help others find theirs. Lily, too, was a frequent visitor, her artistic talents bringing color and creativity to the group, inspiring others to express themselves in new ways. The program became a cornerstone of the community, a place where young people could come to find support, guidance, and a sense of purpose. And through it all, Evelyn remained at the heart of it, her quiet strength and unwavering compassion guiding the way. As the first year of the program came to a close, the church held a celebration to mark the occasion. The hall was filled with laughter and music, the walls adorned with artwork created by the participants, each piece a testament to the growth and transformation they had experienced. Evelyn stood at the center of it all, watching with a full heart as the young people she had come to know so well laughed, danced, and shared their stories. She saw Michael and Lily together, their faces alight with joy, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they were both on paths that would lead them to bright and promising futures. As the evening drew to a close, Clara approached Evelyn, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand. "You've done something incredible here, Evelyn," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "This program has changed lives, and it's all because of you." Evelyn smiled, accepting the glass from Clara. "It wasn't just me," she replied modestly. "It was all of us, working together, believing in each other. That's what made it possible." Clara raised her glass in a toast, her eyes shining with pride. "To Evelyn, and to the difference she's made in this community. Here's to many more years of hope, love, and transformation." The crowd around them joined in the toast, their voices rising in a chorus of celebration. Evelyn felt the warmth of their support, the love that surrounded her, and she knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. As the celebration continued, Evelyn stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was clear and cool, the stars twinkling above like diamonds scattered across the sky. She looked up at them, feeling a deep sense of connection to the universe, to the people in her life, and to the path she had chosen. There was still so much to do, so many lives to touch, but Evelyn felt ready for it all. She had found her purpose, her place in the world, and she knew that the future was bright. With a heart full of gratitude and hope, Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped back inside, ready to continue the work that had become her life's greatest joy. The night was still young, and there were many more stories to be written, many more lives to change, and Evelyn was ready for all of it.